Good morning. This is Andrea Latuski, Director of Education at the American Fraternal Alliance. Welcome to our second webinar on the Alliance Branding Program, focused on brand personality and language. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I have just some logistics before we get started. This webinar is going to be recorded, and early next week you'll receive a link to the recording and a copy of the slides. We encourage you to share the recording and the materials with anyone else in your organization. All of the phone lines have been muted for this morning's webinar, so if you have any questions, please use the chat feature on your computer screen throughout the event. We will have time at the end of the webinar for a Q&A with our presenters. Today, our speakers from the American Fraternal Alliance are Jeff Mitchell, Director of Public Affairs, and Taylor Conrad, Membership and Marketing Coordinator. We are going to get started right away here with Taylor Conrad.
Morning, everyone. So today's webinar is going to focus on brand personality and language. If you notice in the research materials, that's actually the name of one of the materials that you have, but we're actually going to cover some information from all three packets. So to start out, we're going to spend a few minutes discussing how the Maddox Douglas team conducted the research and developed the methodology. Then we'll dig a little deeper and discuss the consumer response and recommendations for topics like fraternal versus community life insurers and what we should be calling ourselves, how to communicate the attributes and benefits of fraternal benefit societies, what do consumers see as the upside of doing business with us, what barriers do consumers see in doing business with us, as well as a few other areas of interest that kind of tie in with those ideas. So our goal today is to help you understand how to begin applying the brand by changing your messaging. Maybe that's on your website or in a newsletter and brochures, something to utilize language and personality that clicks with your consumers. And we realize that each of you has your own brand and your own way of doing things, your own products. So listen to what works with these consumers and then put it through a filter for your society. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to explain that this information should help you transform how you write about your society, do your marketing, what you should put on your website. And the next webinar, we're going to kind of format as a case study and physically show you how you can make those changes. So if we go through the webinar today and you have all this information and you're still not sure of what to do with it, the next webinar should definitely help you get some more solid ideas. This webinar is going to be collaborative, so please ask questions. We'll take a few breaks here and there to ask if anyone has any questions. And we'll also be doing a couple polls to get an idea of what you guys are doing to go along with some of the information. So if everyone's ready, we're going to get started, and I'm going to pass it over to Jeff to talk a little bit about the methodology.
Good morning. In this section, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to discuss how we got all of this information. The content that you'll hear in today's webinar was gathered from two separate but complementary market research studies. One of them was a quantitative prediction market study to discover who, how, and what people think and feel about the attributes and characteristics of fraternal benefit societies, and to obtain guidance for optimizing how to best communicate the benefits of our organization and drive acceptance and growth with new consumers. The second study was a qualitative 3-day online bulletin board focus group, and we refer to it here as BBFG. During the 3 days of online discussion, participants were asked to log into the discussion board to respond to questions and engage in the dialogue 1 or 2 times per day. For the quantitative prediction study in the U.S., we had 552 consumers who were financial decision makers in their home or had significant input in those decisions. We used an income range of $35,000 to $150,000 a year, and we also see here the demographic information, age group description, and where the members of the panel lived. Now, this study was designed to predict how others will behave, not what the respondents would do themselves. They were asked to respond not with opinion, but with judgment on how others would respond. They were then asked to invest tokens indicating the confidence of their response and then to justify their investment with a few words of a qualitative rationale. For the study in Canada, we surveyed 376 consumers, and again, they were financial decision makers or had significant input. In Canada, their incomes ranged from $45,000 to $200,000, and that's just to make up for the difference in the value of the currency. And again, we see the demographic, age groups, and where the members of our panel lived, as far as urban, rural, suburban, etc. And finally, for the bulletin board focus groups, you'll see that a much smaller sample was used. As a qualitative investigation of these issues, it's important to note that this research was designed for the participation of only a small number of participants. The research findings are best used for their directional more than their conclusive value. Now, during the 3 days, again, the online discussion, participants were asked to log in to the discussion board a couple times a day and engage in dialogue and answer questions. Now, this qualitative research, the BBFG, drove another round of quantitative research that we're going to discuss on future webinars. Now, let's just take a break here and see if we have any questions at all on the methodology. So use chat to send in those questions, and let's see if we have anything.
Doesn't look like we have any questions at this time if you want to keep going.
Okay, we'll move on, and I'm going to throw it back over to Taylor to talk about Fraternal.
So now we're going to get into some of the research. We're going to talk about kind of a hot button topic. If you've been to any of the Fraternal and Communications mid-year meetings over the past several years or last year's symposium, you know that we all struggle with the word fraternal. I know that some societies utilize it and embrace it, and others do their best to avoid it and find other ways to describe who they are and what they do. So let's look at what consumers in our studies thought about the name Fraternal Benefit Society. And before I kind of get into this slide and what it means, we're going to do a quick little poll here. So does your society embrace the word fraternal, or do you use other words to describe your society? So 67%, yes, we use the fraternal, and then 32%, no, we use other words. So that's, I would say, what I was expecting and pretty interesting, and I think that this information will definitely be interesting to you then if, you know, that's our polling numbers. So to touch back on this slide, this was a reaction to the name Fraternal Benefit Society before being given a definition. So only 4% indicated a Fraternal Benefit Society based on just the name alone. In addition, as we've heard in the past in different research studies, when consumer respondents were specifically asked about just the word fraternal, we found it's likely to be perceived more negatively due to the heavily masculine undertones that it has and the associations with college fraternities. So if you kind of look up here at the left, the interpretation of the word, you know, some of the words that go along with it, brotherly coming ahead at 35%, followed by college fraternity, mutual, male, old. So you take that with the reaction of the word fraternal, you know, it's definitely on the neutral negative side of the spectrum as to being seen more positive. And then in the focus group, a completely different study, consumers again told us that they don't really like the name. They find it confusing or off-putting. Once we gave them the definition of a Fraternal Benefit Society, we asked how that impacted their perception of these organizations, and we heard that it doesn't really fit their vision of what they were hearing this company does. So some of the responses that you can see in the name confusion section, to me, it's only a name. When I first read fraternal benefit societies, I thought of people at a school and a fraternity. I still like the word community. I do not think it makes me think more positively or negatively about the organization. I do find the name a bit confusing. If you had not described it, I wouldn't know what it meant, and certainly does not make me think of community. Others told us that they have some negative impressions of fraternals due to the name, so more negative because the title makes me think of a group of old men. Fraternal makes it feel uppity to me. Yes, brotherhood, but it just gives me negative emotions. Someone said seems less clear what they're about, and another one, I just don't feel it fits the product. So that brings us to the question of, what consumers felt was a better way to describe the organization if they're confused and they're feeling a little negatively about fraternal benefit societies. So I'm going to switch it over to Jeff to kind of get into some other options.
So we came up with a bunch of things that we could call ourselves, a wide variety. We work with the people at Maddox Douglas, and one of the ones that we put in front of them actually came through the Alliance's Grow Younger Task Force at a meeting a couple years ago in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, community life insurers. And in focus groups, overwhelmingly, they felt that the phrase community life insurers was more on target. They told us that the organization was community focused. It shows that they're local and care about their customers on a more personal level. So given that result, we retested the phrase in a subsequent round of research. As you can see, can we flip to the next slide, please? And as you can see here, the consumer who does not know the definition of a fraternal benefit society, once again, is much more likely to buy from a community life insurer. So we would suggest that maybe you start playing around with referring to yourself that way. Now we know that in some states regulations require disclosure as a fraternal, so that could always be done in subsequent body copy or even fine print. Now, for those of you that have decided to embrace the word fraternal and run with it, we do have some good news for you as well. Your strategy will work. You're just going to have to work a little harder. As this slide shows, once a consumer understands what a fraternal is, it makes up for their discomfort with the word. So you are again going to have to do a little more with education and supporting copy in your promotional activities. Now, let's throw it open for a little discussion. Again, does anyone have any questions or comments they want to share through chat at this time?
So just a comment here is that it's important to note that the consumer reactions are both from boomers and millennials. So it's like across generationally, and fraternal is equally confusing to both, and community is equally appealing to both. So that's just something we want to throw in there as well. It's also really important for your agents to kind of understand this language as well, kind of educating them on why it might not be helping them and how to maybe transition quickly from fraternal to other words that maybe will work better. I think that's all the comments that we have now, Jeff, if you want to continue.
Okay, Taylor's going to discuss communicating the attributes of these organizations.
So now that we've talked a little bit about the name and how people feel about some of the language right up front in the title, we can discuss a little bit maybe about the definition, what people were hearing about these societies, because they definitely had a positive reaction to the description. And so this question, they were asked what the most important attributes in attracting people to this specific type of organization was. And our upfront winner was providing financial security and giving back to the community at 45% of the respondents. and following those up at the top with it, providing retirement income solutions or life insurance and additional benefits to their members. And to kind of compare with that, some of the bottom responds we're getting from people were not-for-profit status, causes or groups that they support. So this idea is something you're going to see throughout this research. You're probably going to get sick and tired of me talking about, the and, but this is what really started to formulate the campaign and the ads that you can find in the assets on the website. The fact that it's providing financial security and giving back to the community is what is most attractive about these organizations. And to go along with this, some comments from people: you get this type of insurance to help with financial security for yourself and your family, and if they give back to community, that is just a plus. And the main focus is still the insurance component. The charitable component is secondary. So again, you can see how this really helped to start that ampersand and the and giving back campaign. So Jeff, if you want to talk about, how to communicate the benefits of these organizations.
Sure, and I apologize. I've been told I'm a little quiet, so I will speak louder. When we discussed the ways that we're communicating the benefits of fraternals, we found that action-oriented phrasing, using words like making a difference or giving back, emerge as the clear winners here. Now, making a difference, we saw an overall score of 30% as it helps people envision the end result. Some of the verbatim responses that we got on that comment were, it's more action-oriented phrase. It helps people believe that by purchasing insurance, they are improving the lives of others. Benefits both members and the community. People like the idea of being able to change things and have an actual impact that will outlast them. So again, through all of that, we're getting very much that ampersand. That's why that drove that on the creative that was done for you. Now, in Canada, we've got a little bit different response to this question. North of the border, we find that giving back was viewed as the best messaging, with supportive and mission-driven coming in the next two spots. Now, next we're going to look at the way we fund the benefits, and Taylor's going to talk to us about what the research says about that.
So now we know how to talk about the benefits, and people are definitely going to be interested in how you're funding those benefits. So it's good to know how to talk to people about that. And in this one, you can see, some of our top responses: reinvest their profits put to social good. They imply that your social value responsibility over personal self-interest. And then if you look to the bottom, or not necessarily the bottom, but lower than those two responses, not-for-profit falls, in the middle of the list, which is a pretty popular term that's used with not only societies, but that I know we've used as well in some of our print. And this information that we've had has led us to change how we talk about, what fraternals are doing, steering away from words like charity and not-for-profit and focusing on, giving to the community and keeping it more local, more close to people. Some of the responses that we saw from this, it tells you exactly where the money is coming from. And it's a positive way of telling everyone that their profits are going towards good. So it's straight and to the point, and people get it, and they like those descriptions. And this is another situation where we see a little bit of a difference in Canada. They do like the word reinvest, but as opposed to profits, they just prefer reinvest the money they make as opposed to profits, which, is basically just a different way to say profits. So, Jeff, if you want to talk a little bit about, the community interaction.
Sure. The communal aspects and the way we describe our community, whether we call them members or, a lot of times we'll mention words like lodges or chapters or whatever, and we went out and we wanted to know how best to describe the communal aspects of fraternal benefit societies. And the word that floated to the top was actually community. It was a real hot button word. I mean, and if you're looking at the data, it blew all the other responses away with a total of 33%. We can see that other phrases that work are member-based. We also want to talk about reinvesting back into the community and our commitment to show an impact in communities. Now, once again, in Canada, things were a little different. In Canada, the word cooperative rated highest, with community coming second. Now, I want to caution you that if you opting to use the word cooperative, check with your legal counsel first. The Alliances Counsel, Todd Martin, has mentioned in the past that at least in the United States, referring to ourselves as a cooperative can be problematic from a compliance standpoint. So if you decide to use that word cooperative, you're going to want to check it out with your counsel and your compliance folks. And next we'll talk about some of the biggest motivators to do business with us.
So I mentioned before that you're probably going to hear me mention the "and" a few times and have it emphasized throughout, and this is another situation where we see that. So biggest motivator to do business with this type of organization: providing life insurance or retirement income solutions and giving back to the community, leading by 40%. So this statistic, along with other data, shows us that providing life insurance is the most important attribute, and then that benefit of giving back is an added bonus, further supporting that "and" campaign, like I mentioned before. Some of the comments that we saw with this question, people like to be involved in companies that benefit them and their community. People try to find ways to give back to their community while also taking care of their own interests. So these are great comments. People are excited. They're happy about this giving back to the community. But what I want to point out here in these comments is, the words "people like to be involved." People try to find ways to give back. It's not people need to be involved. It's not people go out of their way and find ways to give back. So that's further emphasizing, that the financial security has to come first before giving back to the community and emphasizing that. So to go along with that, we're going to ask another poll. Does your society plan to develop training based on this research for your agents? So Andrea mentioned before that a lot of this language could be great for agents to use. So have any of you so far, or maybe during this webinar, thought about it, that this would be great training for your agents? So this is great. A lot of you are saying yes and maybe. You're getting those first ideas of what you can do with some of this information, and this is definitely what we want to hear. We want to hear that you guys are interested in involving your agents in this and starting to use it in their language as well. So Jeff, if you want to talk a little bit about the opposite end here and talk about some of the barriers of doing business with us.
Sure. There were some barriers that came out in the research as well. The two biggest barriers are price, product, service competitiveness, and a lack of understanding regarding the organization. Price especially is the most important hurdle, and we heard that in one of the other quotes. A good price is a prerequisite for you guys to be able to do the business. Some of the quotes that we got were, "I think people are only willing to purchase this type of policy if it's priced competitively and a good product. People tend to look at the bottom line. If they don't offer competitive prices and good incentives, people will find other options to suit their needs. And price is everything. I can't afford it. I can't do it." Do you feel like you have, let's take a poll for a second. Do you feel like you have competitive products, pricing, and customer service comparable to other insurance providers? And this is interesting here too. With competitive products looking like about 65% of you feel like your products are competitive. 61% about actually just went down to 60. Pricing is competitive, and your customer service 57%. So pricing and customer service. This is important because people love the idea of doing a financial purchasing a financial tool that gives back to the community, but only if it's competitive. That's an add-on. That's a plus one for them. It's got to be a competitive product at a good price. Then they're happy to have it give back to the community. If it's not, we've got some work to do. So Taylor, let's talk quickly about one other topic: the importance of financial ratings.
So we often hear societies mention how their members maybe don't care about ratings, or maybe it's not important to their growth, but we have stats here to prove otherwise. We've spent a lot of time during this webinar emphasizing that volunteering and giving back and focusing on community is a great added benefit to fraternal benefit societies. But consumers care about providing financial security to themselves and their families first when it comes to choosing life insurance. So we know there are so many ways to highlight all the great work that fraternals do. This is the type of situation where a good picture could be worth 1,000 words, or telling people about how much money you raise for something can really make a difference. But how do we start putting the importance of financial security front and center for potential customers if that's what they're really looking at? So one way is to have a good financial strength rating. If you think consumers don't care about these ratings, you may be fooling yourself. 73% of respondents believe these ratings can increase confidence in fraternal benefit societies. And that second column there, 18% of respondents would rank this as one of the most important aspects of a business. So that orange line kind of separates some of the top answers in terms of being ranked, first or second in terms of most important when it comes to these types of companies. So it's important to note, young consumers and older want to do business with companies that are sound businesses. Anybody who lived through the economic crash of 2008 is going to be wary of who they put their trust in, and objective financial ratings can definitely instill that in them. Many times members feel, their primary customers aren't actually the consumers, but they're the agents. And just like regular consumers, agents want to represent a company with a sound seal of approval as well, so this benefits that as well. There are many alternatives out there for ratings, but if you choose not to be rated, then putting an emphasis on how long you've been in business and finding ways to show consumers that you're a stable company will definitely help highlight this important aspect of being a trustworthy business. It's great to say that you've been in business for 125 years and definitely emphasize that, and then find ways to show them that you're going to be around for another 125 years if you choose not to get rated. So Jeff, if you want to talk a little bit more about what's up next.
Sure. As we mentioned at the beginning, the next webinar, which is next Wednesday, January 17th at 11 a.m. Central, we're going to do a case study so we can kind of put some of the topics that we've discussed today into action and show you some easy ways that you can start to implement those into your website, into your blast emails, into some of your social media posts. So that's what we'll be doing next week. Now, let's throw it open for some conversation. I really hope that some of you have some questions to chat in. We'd like to, keep this kind of interactive as much as the technology allows us. So do we have any questions?
So we've had a couple questions come in, and we have plenty of time for more. So if you would go ahead and use the chat feature on your computer screen to type in any questions that you have. I'm also going to unmute Joe Noddy, who's on the line, to help answer some questions. So it looks like the first question that came in was that some states require our organizations to use the word fraternal when describing ourselves. How can we transition from that legal requirement to the words that work better?
again, I think you need to work with your compliance counsel and work with your legal team, but you could use community life insurer. I know that you need to disclose that you are a fraternal, but you could do that in supporting copy or in fine print even at some point in the ad. You just want to make sure that you are at that minimal level compliant. But I think that the way you talk about it in body copy and everything, you can say a community life insurer. And I don't know if Joe has any more input on that or not that he would like to add.
Thanks, Jeff. I mean, my takeaway from this whole session really is something I believed in for a long time, and that is that words have meaning. Words really mean something. And the word fraternal, to the vast majority of consumers who should be in our sweet spot, is either misunderstood or perceived negatively. So, and I know we have lots of members who understand what fraternal is and believe in it, and believe me, I believe in the concept too. But for prospective members out there, their understanding of that word is far, far different than yours. And their understanding of it, frankly, if you're going to try to grow your organization, is more important than yours. So we have to figure out a way to transition from, in some states, the legal requirement of calling yourself a fraternal. I know in California, it's got to be everywhere. Other states are less so with that requirement. But in your written materials, in your website, and most importantly on the words that are coming out of your field representative's mouth, it is important to be able to get from that, we are XYZ Fraternal, which is a community insurer. Transitioning to those words, community insurer, quickly. Words that make sense, that trigger an emotion, that spark an interest of the consumer is really, really critical. And I think that transition part of it is really, really important. The other things that kind of jumped out at me in just refreshing my memory of going through this, listening to the presentation today, was that we're financial services organizations first, at least in the minds of our prospective members. And if we're not competitive, downright excellent at the blocking and tackling of financial services, which is product, price, distribution, ease of doing business, all those things, all the fraternal stuff in the world doesn't mean diddly. It's a nice but it's not the primary. Moreover, if you don't get the folks in through the financial services door and have a solid, profitable operation, as one of my friends who's a CEO of a society here in Illinois has said over and over again, no money, no mission. You can't support the good works of a fraternal without a profitable financial services operation. And the last thing that I wanted to point out, that as Taylor was running through some of those points, there was, this is a company that helps me save for retirement or secures my future and does this. There was a lot of it. And is a big word. And if you look at our primary visual in all this branding, it's an ampersand. It demonstrates a visual demonstration of the and it's very, very powerful. And you combine, the words that resonate with consumers, community insurers. You combine the information we're providing you about what's important to those consumers in the financial services, and you give them that visual and if you drive this down to your field representatives, which this is where the rubber meets the road, folks. If they don't buy into this, if they don't understand it, if they're not using this whole exercise has been just that, an exercise. There are things that we can put to work right now, and over the course of the next few weeks we'll continue this training. But we really hope you will embrace this and drive it down from the corner office of your society to the retail agent, independent or captive, who is the face and voice of your society to current members and, more importantly, to prospective members. That's the really critical takeaway for me in this whole webinar today.
Thanks, Joe. We had a question come in kind of about the usage of community life insurer. So the question is that, was there any feedback that community life insurer might be an insurer who provides a collective form of insurance for a community as opposed to individuals?
We did not see, we didn't get any feedback like that, but we didn't press that either in the raw data. So we had nothing arose from the focus group on that or in the follow-up survey that we did, but I think most of them understood it pretty well.
Another question that has come up is, can we use this terminology in social media campaigns? Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. And if you look at the resource library, there's some social media campaigns that are pre-done, and obviously you can, steal the copy from them if you don't want to use the graphics or whatever. But absolutely, this can be used in social media campaigns, and please look at the resources that are available on the branding website.
And to build off what Jeff is saying, this next webinar, when we kind of go through and we give you some examples of how you might work this language into websites or different parts of your website and your About Us, we're also going to talk a little bit about social media and how you can work this into a post and what it could really do for you as well.
Great, thank you. So we still have a few minutes here, so if anyone has any additional questions, please use the chat feature on your computer screen rather than raising your hand through the audio option. Just go ahead and chat your questions in and we'll send them to our presenters here. You can also feel free to email any questions that you have to Jeff. His email address is up on the screen there.
And we really appreciate your feedback on this. We used a lot of the feedback that you gave us for the first one when we walked through the website and all of that stuff to help inform this one and help us continue to keep sharpening that pencil by sharing with us or asking questions or sending me an email, either during or after the webinar.
Okay, well, at this point, it doesn't look like there are any additional questions. I'll just give everyone another minute or so if they want to type one in. Otherwise, you will, if you signed up for all of the branding webinars, you'll receive an additional email with a confirmation for next week's webinar that has all of the login information. And if not, we'll send around that link again so that you can get registered for that webinar. And as I mentioned before, all of the recording for this webinar and the copy of the slides will be sent and posted on our website. It looks like we've had one more question come in. So the question was, prior to some of this, Fraternal was a decent sort of short and to the point description of our organization. And with that descriptor being viewed negatively by consumers, is there a shortened phrase or descriptor that you would recommend better? You mentioned community insurer. Is that the best or something that doesn't take further elaboration?
Say that one more time, sorry.
I think the question is community insurer a short and to the point descriptor that can be used in place of fraternal, or is there something that doesn't need any further elaboration? So the question, I think, is do people understand community insurer? Is that going to be a better use?
I think the community insurer, it's not as far as a descriptor. That's not the thing. I think with the description, we're still going to have to, when you talk about the description, you have to think about that ampersand. We are a financial services company, and we give back to the community. The use of the word community life insurer was just to get away from some of the negative baggage that the word fraternal brings up in consumers. And you mentioned, that fraternal was kind of a cool catch-all word. Unfortunately, consumers don't understand it. They don't know what to do with it, or they think it means, we're having a kegger at the house on campus. So community insurer is just another description, but we still want to talk about ourselves remembering that ampersand. Does that, I hope that gets at your question.
I think that there's another comment that came in regarding the community insurer, and that they believe that there may be some confusion with that descriptor, and that fraternals insure individuals, they don't insure communities. So I think that there may just be some more questions about the use of this community insurer phrase.
Okay, and we will take a look at that, and on next week's webinar, we'll try to focus in on ways to use that community and how you can integrate it in, and we'll keep talking about it. And I thank you for sharing your concerns about the issue. I just got an email from someone else who has concerns that community is kind of a bland, generic word. So on next week's case study, let's take a look at that word and really kind of dig down and see what we can do with it. And I appreciate, all of us working together to make this successful and kind of the user group format that I hope to form here. And thanks for sharing.
To go along with that, it's great that so many people are interested in this idea and this topic, so we can further explore, the language that we use. And with only an hour time slot, there's so much more information in those research packets on the branding website. So if this is something that you are interested in and you'd like to look more into, I encourage you to go through. I know there's a lot of information about the language of fraternal and fraternal benefit societies in that first packet about language and personalities. So you can go in there, and it's all near the beginning too. So there's a lot of great information in there. Unfortunately, there isn't enough time in even the day to go over all of the information. So Jeff and I tried to pick out some of the high points and the key points in those packets. And so hopefully this will bring your curiosity to all that information.
Okay, and with that, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions that have come in, but if you do think of any questions, feel free to reach out to anyone on our staff here. So we just want to thank you all for joining us this morning, and thank you all to our presenters as well. So thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day.